All right, so it's going to make people come.
Yeah, let's start and let's try maybe to gather some people outside together.
Right.
I mean, I didn't imagine they would still be hungry today, apparently they are.
Yeah, and we're a little bit off of schedule, but we'll manage, so we'll see when this panel ends. So, yeah, maybe 45 minutes and then we'll manage.
Okay, let's go. So this morning we just ran a technical discussion. Now we try to move from the technical side to other sides that are just as important for companies and startups. You may not understand client-side validation and ARC, but what you need to do in a company is mostly to make money somehow, to protect that money, to give this money to the shareholders. So you need some kind of non-technical framework, which usually includes some company structure, some capital to start, and some jurisdiction to try to move around and to try to make your business work and to have your base camp, even if a Bitcoin business can probably be mostly based out of the cyberspace or metaverse like she's going to say today, but we still need some kind of practical place. So let's start with Max and Stacy. El Salvador. We know it's legal tender, so we know that everything started out of the idea of people sending back money, remittances, and being able to buy stuff. Then the narrative improved with a lot of points about basically non-devaluable treasury for the government itself, but then it's also shifted to basically attracting Bitcoin businesses, and there is all the thing about the Bitcoin office that you run and the Bitcoin city. So how is going? What you are satisfied with in the last year, let's say a couple of years, and what is still missing, and what do you think will even improve?
Yeah, so when we first arrived in El Salvador 2 years ago, the president had declared Bitcoin legal tender, it's a Bitcoin country, and our idea was like, how do we fit in there? How can we help? And we had basically had a VC fund early in Bitcoin, like 2012, 2013. And then we arrived here and we settled into El Salvador, and we realized what actually needed to happen was we needed to help the president restructure the entire fabric of the economy in order to, we don't really focus on Bitcoin adoption at the pupuseria level, and I know there are a lot of Bitcoiners who think that's important, but to us, I felt like we needed to focus on the number of the best builders in Bitcoin and the best companies in Bitcoin who would be willing and able to adopt El Salvador as their home base. Because if we could do that, then we could be the Silicon Valley of Bitcoin, because we needed the builders who were going to be there, not just the guys with a few Bitcoin who want to hang out at the beach all day and swim, and that's fun, I like it, but we need builders to achieve the vision that the president wanted. So we want to attract the VC investors, and that's part of our adoption policy.
Yeah, so to follow up on that a little bit, we were looking at Bitcoin as a brand booster, that it would boost the brand of El Salvador and President Bukele, that they shared similar values, similar qualities. And to that end, we've been very conscious and working hard to make El Salvador a Bitcoin maximalist country and to follow in the ethos of Bitcoin maximalism. And so the calculation there is this, that sure, you may give up some incremental gains by being more permissive toward let's, for the sake of this conversation, be gracious and call them altcoins, okay? You may give up incremental gains by being more open to the altcoin world, but those gains are going to be significantly less than the gain you get by pushing the maximalist brand, right? And I think that strategy has been a good one, because to Stacy's point, it has attracted the best and the brightest. Additionally to what Stacy was just saying, We did a VC fund when we came in, because that's what we knew. It became obvious quickly that what the country was needed were some homegrown developers and some homegrown talent. And so we immediately called 𝐕𝐵𝐮𝐜 and said, Jimmy, come to El Salvador and teach a group of developers and get this party started, which he did. And then Stacy then pushed this into what became 𝐂𝐜𝐿+, right? So this just became what we have here today. So that's I would say, good focus.
But I just want to bring back to the fact that our focus has been on that metric of how many of the best and brightest individuals and companies in Bitcoin were adopting El Salvador as their home base, as even if it's not physical, it's just like spiritual. Like they consider themselves like close to El Salvador because we're a Bitcoin country. That I knew, we've been around Bitcoin for a long time, so we know that Bitcoiners don't accept a LARP, right? They want to verify that you're serious about it and it's not just a brand exercise, it's not just an election shtick, that we're building all the way down and across, like we're building wide and deep, and that we're building the home talent. We just keep on working, building the 𝐂𝐜𝐿+, building the, working with key partners, including Folder, Bitfinex, like building the best regulations upon which we could then build capital markets in El Salvador. So our focus is, luckily for us, like there was this huge bear market because that helped keep the shitcoiners away and let us just build the foundation, the layer zero upon which like all the Bitcoin stuff could be built. And we knew that people were watching always, and that if they saw, like if the likes of Oleg and Jack could see that we're just building and building and building and we're serious about this, that eventually they would come. Build and they'll come.
So Oleg, you were also involved in 𝐂𝐜𝐿+ mostly by initiating the spread of the participation to the full venture portfolio startups that were a big part of the 𝐂𝐜𝐿+ experience. What do you think are what do you think is the timing for being able to build companies, not just from people that will move to El Salvador to take benefit of the infrastructure and friendly government, but also from there directly? How much would you expect to wait until you can actually fund a Salvadorian company born there? Is something that's still science fiction, or you think we may be closer?
Well, timing is, in terms of venture capital, one of the most difficult questions, because a very common reason for startups to fail is that they were not timed correctly. Like they just started too early before there was enough market to support a venture capital backed startup. On the other hand, why such a phenomenon like Silicon Valley became very successful, as they were able to accumulate and utilize and reutilize human resources located in one place across a couple of streets. So why for a long time VCs in Silicon Valley were investing mostly only in Silicon Valley based startups is because if a startup has failed, they would be able to actually take the founders of the failed startup, and given that the founders retained enough goodwill and reputation, they would be able to fund their next startup. And this largely contributed to the growth of the venture capital ecosystem in Silicon Valley. Now, what changes with Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is very global, and for Bitcoin to succeed, there needs to be like a balanced ecosystem in different places of the world. But how software companies work? For software companies, especially in a startup, it's very difficult to start something without having a few people attached to a whiteboard, especially in the beginning. And especially for software developers, like we all want to come to conferences, to hang out together, to brainstorm together. So that's why building hubs, what like Giacomo you also call like hubs or Bitcoin hubs, and what you, Stacy, and Max are building in El Salvador is a very important part of forming the venture capital-backed ecosystem as well, because there needs to be places of gravitation, of talent, to sustain enough growth. And one of the most exciting things for us in El Salvador that was created due to support of Max and Stacy was a collaboration with the university, who would funnel their students who would be interested to learn about Bitcoin. Because if you take, for example, a student who has graduated like an American university or European university and is trying to learn about his career and how to make the best out of the options he has in his life, there is a good chance that he will just stick with the traditional options, like going to work for Google, Microsoft, for a bank, and just get a mortgage and buy a house and things like this. And and especially the more you get into like a professional career, the difficult the switch is, because the cost of switching is very high. And in places like colleges and in countries that are developing countries and developing in a positive way, there is a way more flexibility to join a startup and to learn something new, because from like a grand perspective of things, every option is like almost equal. You can try this and that, but now you can also join a Bitcoin community and a Bitcoin startup.
But I also want to interject there and say, importantly about El Salvador is that it itself is at ground zero of a startup nation, because the past 40, 50 years are over. The Salvadorans will know that there's been 40, 50 years of violence, of the country being abandoned by the people, the economy abandoned and stranded by global markets, and that is over, and we're at day one on ground zero of a new economy. And the president is, like as Max often points out, like Steve Jobs. He is, he's the leader. He's not building this stuff. He wants the builders to come there and, hey, we're open for business. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you need. We'll provide it. Just come and build, because it's from scratch. You could do what you want to do. So all your dreams that you have in Bitcoin and trying to fit it into the legacy system, well, there's no legacy system there to overcome. You can build what you say you want to build.
Tabula rasa, practically.
Well, to follow up on the synergies between Bitcoin and the government is, well, the government has one huge bureaucracy that it no longer has to worry about, and that is the central bank and everything associated with the central bank. Their monetary policy has been outsourced to Bitcoin. And so that makes the bandwidth of the government able to focus on these other things. And if you see, you watch what goes on in these countries that have big central banks, the anticipation every month or two about, well, they're going to raise rates, they're going to lower rates, and the GDP number, the BLS number, and all these things which we know are cooked in the back room, and they're all fake. You don't need any of that in El Salvador, because we know exactly what the monetary policy is, we know exactly what the inflation rate is, and we know exactly we have the best and the hardest money in the history of the world. So that gives, in my view, the government, in particular the president, the ability to laser focus on areas of, laserize in these other areas. So you see things are happening with great speed and alacrity in El Salvador, in part because of this fact. So that's where some of the synergies come in. People don't see how the two relate to each other. That's one area. Obviously, security is another area, but that's kind of another question.
When you invested in startups, when you had to consider investment, how much weight did you put on the jurisdiction where a startup is basically located? And if you put importance into that, what are the key ingredients of a jurisdiction that will make your startup more appealing? For example, we mentioned Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, of course, there is the network effect of other startups, but that comes later. What was probably at the origin of Silicon Valley and Hollywood as well was mostly a tax reasons for many kind of specific markets. So what would you classify as key ingredients that a jurisdiction may have in order to make the startup base camping there more appealing?
Yeah, understand. Yeah, I think jurisdiction, yes, like Silicon Valley, since about 15, 16,
directly.
I already invested several companies in Silicon Valley. I think it should be the most. That's the internet investment, semiconductor, and later. I've been through the blockchain and crypto space, right? And that's how I come to Bitcoin.
We are all sinners.
Okay, so yeah, I also invested in crypto company in Silicon Valley. Yes, at that time I think U.S. because the law, right, the support. I think also the geographic, like Silicon Valley, is the good area to invest, right? You can fund those talent. However, I think now what people call Silicon Valley exit, right? The left San Francisco and those areas. So I think, especially now, Bitcoin, moving to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the more global, global software, global money. So I think we will see more and more. I would rather to look at it from the demand perspective. For example, like El Salvador or like other emerging countries, right? Because they don't have the good money, they don't have a good government to protect them, the value. So that could be the good demand for Bitcoin. So definitely that will be important element of the consideration. However, also need to see, because still you invest in, this is from VC perspective, right? You still invest in the company's equity, right? You still need that corporate law, those kind of things, the protection. So still we will wait on the corporate structure, the legal structure of the company. And of course the founder of the, I think it's overall everything. But I think, but let's say for Bitcoin, my answer would be, I think I will be more interested to look at those emerging market, at least the product for the emerging market. For example, of course not China, but maybe India and Southeast Asia, which is I'm more close with. Yeah, something like that.
Stacy, and anybody of you, if you want to step into this question. I know that if you could, you would suggest that entrepreneur in Bitcoin space to basically relocate there physically and also use the country-friendly jurisdiction and government as a protection shield for what they are doing, and also maybe to use the country itself as a guinea pig for the kind of market that we can serve with Bitcoin. So ideally all three. But if you had to choose, the most important thing right now would be to actually open a company there, because given three choices. One choice is you stay wherever you are, you partner the market you want, you live in Europe or whatever, but here this company structure will have strong guarantee of being able to manage Bitcoin with privacy, without the strange taxations, and with long-term guarantees. The second point would be you move here, you live here, you meet other builders, you take advantage of the network effect among maximalists in the capital of zone. And then the third option would be you use this country as an experimental lab, because here there are people that are really trying to live on Bitcoin. So the three are important, but which one do you think is more ready right now?
The last two, I think. There's a place to experiment and try out new things, because I said it's a blank slate, so we can build the capital markets that we want to see. But I think, Bitcoiners, we've always said, how many countries have I seen you in, Giacomo, in cities around the world? We always have our Bitcoin conferences, right? And this is what we do. There is a need to see each other in person and communicate and share ideas, and that's why the Bitcoin conference emerged as such an important part of the Bitcoin space. To bring them at least for some of the months of the year, like around adopting Bitcoin, certain times of the year, to come to El Salvador, be there, participate in building Bitcoin country. I think it's really important because I think President Bukele has done a very bold thing. Like, he's a Bitcoiner, and to show support for what he's doing as he is standing up to exactly Chancellor Hrombrynko's second bailout for banks. Like, he goes back to the fundamental principle of what Bitcoin is. And, you know, as he wrote in his article last year in Bitcoin magazine, like, he's up there, he's you know, done this. And if all Bitcoiners show up, or at least some of us, and show the support and show what we can do different to what the legacy system of Chancellor Hrombrynko's second bailout for banks, I think that's really important. And it establishes that advantage that Silicon Valley had, that first mover advantage of having the earliest you know, coders that would build the internet. The same thing here. It's like the first mover advantage of, okay, Strike is their global headquarters outside the US and now in El Salvador. That means the next country to adopt Bitcoin, they don't have Strike. We have Strike. So, okay, we have Jack Mallers. So they're going to have to try to go for second best. We have, you know, Fold. We have Will Reeves there. So getting those people is really important to show, like, as soon as Jack Mallers announced at the Bitcoin conference in Miami that he was moving global headquarters, we were flooded with calls from other Bitcoiners saying, like, so Jack Mallers is moving there. What have you done for regulations? Like, how is that fitting in with the regulations, what he's doing? Because maybe we'll consider it now. And it's like, yeah, exactly. So it is a network effect, because other companies want to be near where Jack Mallers is and where he's hired people and blah, blah, blah. That's what we're expecting.
So Max, in order to build this network effect, time again is essential, because when you have the momentum of Jack Mallers moving there, if you have a lot of other companies following immediately, you can basically ride the momentum. Otherwise, you need to restart it with some other big example. So basically, we had Bitrefill after a while, moving the headquarters, and then, but we have to keep basically feeding the momentum until it basically goes on itself. And right now, I guess that if you agree, I think that the market conditions also were against us, because the Bitcoin law passed at the very peak of the bull market, and now we have to do the 3-4 years of desert roaming before we go there again. So my question would be, do you think there were like different timing possibilities to try to, I mean, did people, including you, expect the cyclicity of the market to make it this more difficult during these 3 years, and that was the only chance to get to launch the Bitcoin law? Or maybe looking back, waiting for a quiet moment like now would have been more resilient?
I've been in business for 40 years, been in the finance business for 40 years, been in the technology innovation business for 30 years, met a lot of outstanding people, met a lot of wealthy people. You know, I've been around. And meeting President Bukele, I can say, is meeting somebody that I had never met before, and that is a political genius. I know what a technological genius is, I know what a financial genius is. This guy is a political genius. And in that, what does that mean? As a leader, he sets the agenda and sets the mood for people to step out of themselves and do something for their country, do something for their community, which is rare. And to do so in a way that incorporates a real facility for technology, and somebody who was into Bitcoin early, even when he was a mayor, 2017 period, 2018 period, he was already talking about Bitcoin. You have really a really interesting combination of things happening. So I think it's, to answer the question, it's not sensitive necessarily to market timing. I don't think it's really, it's almost like similar to Bitcoin itself. As a hardcore Bitcoiner, I often say, Bitcoin is on a vector, and nothing can stop that vector. It's not correlated to any asset. It's on its own path. And I think with President Bukele in El Salvador, it's similar, that there is a vision and the ability to carry that vision out. I suppose in my lifetime, and in my experience in the United States, we saw something similar with John F. Kennedy, who was able to get people to ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That speech, when it was given back in the early 60s, resonated, and it informed a whole generation to join the Peace Corps and travel the world and try to add something to the community. I see that in El Salvador, which is something I was really too young for JFK. So this is really the first time I'm seeing this, and it's very inspiring.
But I also think the fact that Bitcoin was at like 50,000 or whatever at that time, it was good timing because the Wall Street journals and Bloomberg's and the financial media were all over that story. And so they were looking at Bitcoin and how the hell is it this high? And then President Bukele announced this. And importantly, they all swung their cameras at him and put the microphone in his face. And he had something to say. He could deliver. He wasn't some dork who was like just a LARPer. He was intelligent, and it took, I mean, that's billions of dollars to buy that sort of media attention onto a little country that was the most violent country in the world, and nobody knew where it was or who they were. And now young kids from El Salvador could show up and they're like, hey, you're a Salvadoran, you're a Bitcoiner. Like, everybody knows them, and they're immediately catapulted onto the world stage. So that was part and parcel of the financial press suddenly very freaked out, the US financial press in particular, very freaked out and worried about Bitcoin. So that was good timing. And then it was good timing, conveniently for us, because everybody did show up the first few months, including lots of shitcoiners. And then the bear market happened and everything got wiped out, and all sorts of so-called billionaires got wiped out, especially in the US. So that undermined their ability. You know, they were saying, oh, it's all going to be it's very risky for El Salvador. And then everything in the US collapsed. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should have been looking at our regulated entities here in the United States. But everybody left. So there were already the core builders, you know, the likes of Noor and Nicholas at Galloway and Bitcoin Beach Wallet. They stayed there. They were there from the beginning in El Salvador. That community got to reorganize and deal with the aftermath of all this attention and keep on building. And it just really focused on who the builders were, because we needed to build.
So the market top may not be the best financial entry point, but it's the best political entry point. You get all the attention, and then you have the cleansing of the beer market to basically create purity. That makes a lot of sense. Oleg, what do you think about long-term guarantees of places that are changing a lot? Like El Salvador now is incredibly promising. Like objectively, there is a lot of space to do a lot of very good things. But just like something can improve, something can also deteriorate. We have seen the US itself deteriorate. Silicon Valley, we were mentioning before, went from the center of the world to basically in San Francisco now. And the global power of the United States is basically going down. We have seen many other countries basically exploding and falling, from Japan to Russia. As a long-term investor, what do you think are the signs that some place can be not just promising but also stable for the long future?
Oh, it's hard to imagine what can be stable like today, except constant change. But as investors and as other investors, we invest first of all in people and the teams. Because when there is an early stage startup, there is only the founders who are mostly like software engineers or people knowledgeable about like engineering domains, and it's where the people are going. So if people are going somewhere and their incentives are aligned with the place that they're going to, that's more likely to accrue value over time. Because good people tend to attract good people, which is like 100% true for software and software engineering. I spent all my life in software engineering. It's just about working with the right people and with the smartest people, and that's what we are seeing. Like the places that don't provide incentives for people to stay, they're losing, and the places that create new incentives for people to go, they are succeeding in attracting the brightest people, and that also help to uplift the local community and get local community more engaged and more, and it becomes like smarter, and like over long term, it's more likely to succeed.
I would also add that it was like 3 or 4 months before Michael Saylor got into Bitcoin was when Paul Tudor Jones got into Bitcoin. And that's really important, actually, of the arc of what has happened in Bitcoin since 2020. So remember, during that crash of 2020 in March, when Bitcoin, I guess, via BitMEX was like crashing down to $3,000. Paul Tudor Jones said something which is important to understand El Salvador as well. He's like, he watched this price fall, and you know what? These Bitcoiners were celebrating, and nobody was selling, right? They all, like 80% of these lunatics just kept on holding onto the asset. And I made him, as a Max knows him, his history well, as working on Wall Street in those early days of Paul Tudor Jones. It's like that encouraged him, like, I've got to get into that asset because that's a good asset to hold. And the same thing with El Salvador is, you know, the president is that inspirational leader, and El Salvador is Bitcoin country, and there's a total vibe there. So people are like, yeah, we're El Salvador, we're Bitcoiners, we're Bitcoin country, and that same sort of enthusiasm for the location, to stand up to all the bankers, to stand up to the IMF, to stand up to the US, to stand up to the legacy banking system, to stand up to JP Morgan saying, yeah, you guys are going to fail, and stand up to the rating agencies. And that's important as well to investing in El Salvador.
Plus, Bitcoin, is anti-entropic, right? It's spontaneous order, not spontaneous chaos. And that happens regardless of price, right? Price is the least interesting part of the Bitcoin protocol. Hash rate, for example, you could argue has never been in a bear market. It's just been in a bull market since the Genesis block. So this is informing politically what's happening in El Salvador, I would say, in that there's every 10 minutes there's some innovation coming. They're just, and it's all toward creating more efficient, more cost-effective, greater benefits for the population in the best way possible. So there's another synergy between the two that is not obvious to the casual observer, but the ethos of the spontaneous order that Bitcoin represents is filtering, I would say, into everyday life.
So we may say that basically when Silicon Valley attracted business, that business was somehow neutral to the system itself, was just a mercenary coming there making money, while Bitcoin businesses, basically they are connected to civilization building in a way. They contribute to stability, they just don't parasite stability in a way.
Yeah, and importantly, because most people here will be going to Lugano as well, El Salvador was the first to declare Bitcoin legal tender, and then the mayor of Lugano, inspired by El Salvador, basically made it legal tender in Lugano. And it is global, but there are central nodes, let's call it. El Salvador is a node, Lugano is a node, and it's a very important relationship that is totally crucial to our success in what we're doing in El Salvador. Is Voucher, is Bitfinex, Tether, like our partners are very important. Like we could not do it without them. With the support, technically, financially, spiritually, like enthusiasm and all that stuff. Like we do keep each other going, and there could be another one somewhere in Asia, like to have these points around the globe to be a Bitcoin virtual country.
Yeah, somehow it puts in motion a domino effect that makes the origin even less important. It's historically important, but even if the origin goes back to be unreliable, now the global domino effect, you cannot stop it anymore. You have Lugano, you have Madeira, you have the bottom-up community mirroring Bitcoin Beach everywhere, from the lake to the jungle to the island. So it's a global phenomenon. You cannot stop.
People ask, what about succession in El Salvador?
Yeah, good question.
They won't be there forever. And the answer is that on the foundational level, the country is rebuilding itself. At Volcano Energy, which is the company I'm involved with, I'm pushing for this idea of getting a node in every household in El Salvador. So people get the idea that democracy can be, you can accept or not accept it. You are at the node level. That's the democratic level. And once these institutions have been formulated and the foundation has been set, I think that they'll be good for 100 years. You know, we still see in this country, the 𝐂𝐚𝐧𝐐𝐵 is still standing. Last I checked, right? So these are long-standing institutions, and I think that's what we're trying to build.
Interesting.
And, well, when the internet was first coming around, and the cypherpunks were there in Silicon Valley, and it was a dangerous place, and there were dangerous things said about the internet, but Silicon Valley happened, and it became a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and they were protected. The same thing will happen in El Salvador. Everybody's still like, I don't know, Bitcoin, it allows money laundering and terrorism financing and all this stuff, and they try to come up with a new thing every few months. But you have the Google Plus students, you have the first 21, they're going to, in 5 years' time, they will have already built their companies, but we'll have 5 other graduations in that time. So you're already going to be building the ecosystem, and you're a success. In 5, you're a huge success. Like 5, they didn't take down Silicon Valley, right? The local politicians protected it because they saw the success that it was bringing to their area. So the same thing will happen, I believe, with El Salvador.
Jack, Bitcoin companies may be more interesting than traditional companies because of these new sites, like they actually create a global movement that you cannot have in a single place, and they create an incentive to stability through low-time preference and a different kind of culture. But they may also be more challenging for an investor with respect to business models. For example, in the other industries you have been involved with semiconductors, the business model is very clear. You buy some resources, you treat the resources, you sell the resources. In Bitcoin, every kind of normal business model is completely disrupted. If you have a startup that sells intellectual property, well, Bitcoin tends to be open source, MIT, so we don't have patents. If they collect data from the user to be sold, like Facebook for advertising, well, we like privacy, so we try not to collect the data. So if we create anything good, we will make it easy to replicate and enforced by anybody. So even if you do something that is very profitable, let's say Ziggy's next company with 𝐕𝐭𝐴, they make a lot of money. But in theory, it's also easy for them at the technical level to hide the money they make from the company, so they could distribute less dividend. So how do you approach the challenge of not just helping these companies, but also making some money out of it for the investors?
You asked a very good question. I really like this question. I think, I've been keep thinking about I get into Bitcoin space less than 3 years ago, and then over the last 1 or 2 years, I've been keep thinking about why the Bitcoin company is quite different than other internet companies, or even than other crypto companies. Yeah, you're right, low-time preference. Also, we have to think about, as an investor, we have to think about, yes, of course, making money, put the money in and get exit sooner, maybe 3 years, 5 years, longer, maybe 7 years, 10 years, right? Typical VC, right? However, we got to think about, we are still in the early phase of the Bitcoin adoption, right? If we just think about one, right? Since this is also the low-time preference, also the early phase of the Bitcoinization process. So if we want to make money quick, then I don't think it will work. Then it end up you will invest in shitcoin company or shitcoin like Bitcoin company. Maybe issue some token on layer 2 or some NFT. So so have to. Therefore, I think the mission driven for me is that we have to build together, right? To really to foster more people, educate more people, just like Max and Stacy doing in El Salvador, right? Have this kind of really good role model to work on, right? We really need to bring more people understand Bitcoin, bring more good founder, right? To build some good product, even some layer 2 or whatever, to make people, to use Bitcoin and then to save, put their saving in Bitcoin, and also like a Lightning payment, right? Can much easier than pay by credit card or by other form of payment. Then, we have to encourage more good founder to do the right business at the current phase, not just for make quick money. However, when things come up, for example, like Facebook, Zuckerberg, right? When all the social media kick off, then I think it's still easy to make money, to have the company get IPO or being taken over by a big guy, then you still can get it with a good return. So, like, in conclusion, sorry, I've been saying too long. So, in conclusion is that we have to help those founders to build the good business, right business, for more Bitcoin adoption. Then the money making will come.
So Bitcoin is teaching long-term preference not just to startups but also to VCs, basically. Teaching patience.
Yes, yes.
I would also want to ask Oleg, because Folger does a lot of Lightning investments, is El Salvador is really the biggest Lightning destination. Like everything is Lightning there. And BitRetail recently released a bunch of information about Lightning usage. And when El Salvador came online, Lightning exploded, right? So all our payments, we make lots of payments there, and it's all on Lightning. Like everybody uses Lightning. It's a Lightning native country.
For you, Oleg. She just.
So what do you as a Lightning investor, do you see this Lightning country? It's really, I often say El Salvador is Bitcoin country, but it's also Lightning country. It's like a ground zero for experimentation of what Lightning can do. We have, for example, K1 ATMs that were invented for the local population by a local entrepreneur, Edgar Borgia, who created K1. And it's an ATM where you can put 10 cents as the minimum. You put 10 cents in there and you get Bitcoin in your Lightning wallet. So that was because of necessity there. And that wasn't going to be invented in Switzerland, because it costs $25 to go 1 mile in a freaking taxi there. Nobody needs 10 cents worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Bitcoin and Lightning, one of their functions is infrastructure for payments. Payments and money and finance are a very traditional, a very conservative business. So to be successful in an infrastructure business, you need to have like a lot of stickiness, so that it's really hard to replace the infrastructure. Think of all like the Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, and how easy it is to move like terabytes, petabytes from one cloud to another. It's not so easy, because they create modes to make their customers stick to their infrastructure. Many modes in the financial infrastructure, if you really if you listen to Jack Mallers, to others who understand how traditional financial infrastructure works, so it's a lot of sticks with glue and chewing gum, which is like a very legacy infrastructure that takes days and weeks to settle. Not even speaking about settling between different countries. And there is a lot of protection for this infrastructure to stay in place, because that's a lot of business. So it's easier to imagine building infrastructure where there was less developed infrastructure, and where there is more need for payments of nature that's more complementary with Lightning, like smaller payments and faster payments. And think of railroads. Railroads were built to connect hubs when there was demand to move goods from one hub to the other. The same is happening here. There is a need to move financial equivalent between the US and El Salvador, or Brazil and Southeast Asia. But we're speaking primarily about El Salvador, where the need is huge, because the inefficiency in legacy systems is taking out money out of the GDP of the country and out of the wealth of the local people. So that's where Lightning can shine as infrastructure. And where there could be more adoption is in emerging markets, as Jack was saying. So a lot of our investment thesis in the future is also going to be to support investment in the local markets, because when there is less infrastructure, it's easier to build new infrastructure, and it's going to be a better infrastructure. Like India, that jumped through the personal computer age. They were like pre-personal computer, and then with internet they kind of went to like laptop, mobile phone. So they didn't have a lot of personal computer infrastructure. So same could happen just jumping over like legacy infrastructure that's only suitable to pay like 25 euros, dollars, or francs for a taxi to a better infrastructure.
So I think we have time for at least one question from the audience, right? Correct? Okay, one question.
And by the way, you know, when we were in El Salvador looking out on Bitcoin Twitter, arguing over whether or not Lightning works, and this is like, it was so weird because you're like, what? And everybody uses it here. Like, it was fierce debates going on Bitcoin Twitter about theoretically whether it will work or not. And in the meantime, it was all Lightning in El Salvador in practicality.
Okay. I have a question from wannabe Bitcoin entrepreneur. So, what's the biggest market need in Bitcoin market? So, if I want to build a Bitcoin product or stuff like that, what's the biggest need in the market?
Well, I mean, we get questions. A lot of people want to that sort of securities markets on top of Bitcoin. That's what we get a lot of requests for. Everybody wants to start investing like how the legacy system is, like in securities and in companies and just parts of it, rather than being a VC investor writing a big check. They want to invest like $100 in that and $100 in this. So that's where I see it personally, where people want the tokenization, as you call it.
Yeah, well, you know, the biggest problem in the Bitcoin VC space is Bitcoin. You know, we've been investing since 2012, and nothing has outperformed Bitcoin. And by tens of thousands of percentage points, even with stuff that by traditional VC measurements would be considered a huge hit, it's still an utter failure when priced in Bitcoin. So, you know, and not until the volatility simmers down are you going to see an explosion in that kind of VC, in my opinion. And I don't think we're going to see volatility start to calm down until you get to $1 million, right? I think the Satoshi has been pulled to $1 per Satoshi. I think that's what is going to happen naturally. But, and then until then, so the only, you know, when we were doing 𝐂𝐚𝐧𝐞𝐫 Capital, we were looking to do education tech or ed tech, you know, right away. Like we wanted to figure out how to get education off the ground, and then that led to these other kind of education programs. But and pretty much everything across the board is open up. We started off, we were heavy into exchanges in the early days, because that's what our background was in. You know, we went to Bitcoin in 2011 in Prague at the invitation of Tony Kalippi, who was starting BitPay. He was so anxious for us to be there. He said, "Let me pay for your plane tickets. I'm sending you 800 Bitcoin." So, to give you an idea what the price was at that time. But that's my answer.
Okay, my answer will be, of course, besides the Lightning payment for those, especially those countries without a good traditional financial infrastructure, I think two areas I will look more optimistic at this moment. One is indeed, just like Max mentioned, the EdTech, the Bitcoin education, indeed, because now the whole world needs more education. So if a startup can build a good education program, either online or offline or together, then to teach more people, all kind of people understand Bitcoin. I think this could be a good business, good startup business. And second is also what we need, right? How to, instead of putting the, yeah, of course this is also part of education, but I mean more technical side is how to securely store your Bitcoin in a self-custody, in a multi-sig. I mean, for individual, for example, yeah, I'm also an investor for on-chain capital, so they are doing a good job. But however, let's say for corporate, for institutional investors, maybe they also need different type of multi-sig, different type of self-custody.
One quick thing, what would get me excited if somebody came to me with something in gaming. This is totally underdone in Bitcoin. Gaming. We have Thunder Games, which we have an investment in. No, I don't understand it because gaming is so huge, and it seems like Bitcoin is there's so much to do there. That would be, if you came to me with a pitch on that, I would immediately look at it.
I just agree with all of the above. Like, infrastructure drives demand for security because you cannot have an insecure payments infrastructure. And then applications drive adoption of infrastructure because things like games make Bitcoin more accessible to people outside of the existing Bitcoin community. But also there are interesting things such as things that lead to overall growth of economic activity. So if we think about how money developed over its history, it developed from like hardly divisible like physical money, like a rock or like a cow, and then like smaller pieces like shells, and then eventually it went into paper money. And then after the paper money, it's now like digital money, one of which forms that we believe is only the best one is Bitcoin. But the reason for that is that the velocity of money turnover leads to or helps economic growth because you can have more transactions and you rationally assume that with every transaction there is like added value created because people are transacting for a reason, because they're exchanging value to create some more value. So with almost instant, almost decentralized micropayments with no borders, you're gonna have like just much more commerce going on. Starting from games to digital content, where everybody on one side of the world can become a digital content creator, specifically in the education space, which has a lot of value to offer, and in other spaces as well. So micropayments enable economic growth as such, because it's like a natural progression of money in the same way how we think about like progression of messaging. From like telegraph to telephone to email and then to like instant messaging. It's what enables economic growth of economic activity, micropayments.
Yeah, can I add one point on the micropayments, which I think is a very interesting, especially now we talk about Nostr, right? For Nostr, let's say decentralized social media, if it's growing right more and more, and then naturally the payment will be Bitcoin, will be Lightning, for example. I think other kind of new applications like the Nostr in other aspects, I think then the micropayment will be embedded into the system. Then that will be a really good potential for both.
Thank you very much, and it's over. Big round of applause for our panelists.